Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and remember, context is everything. Context is Everything Media Network, Chairman, Vice President, CEO, and all of the above. John Michael Monroy, going to read to you Chapter 9, Section 2 today of the textbook that I'm reading to build my context, because context is everything. Let's start with the review of Section 1. The High Middle Ages, 1050 to 1450. Nobles in the church had more power than monarchs. So this is important. This is the theme the whole time, at least in yesterday and today's. Nobles in church had their own courts, their own taxes, and their own armies. Monarchs set up systems of royal justice, created government bureaucracy, taxes, and armies. And what they did smartly is they tried to gain respect, gain standing with the middle class. Middle class is brand new because not paper currency, but currency was just becoming popular in that feudal system to counteract the feudal system, which was more labor economy, with money rising up at the end of the early Middle Ages, the beginning of the High Middle Ages. Those serfs, those peasants, some of them, artisans and merchants particularly, were able to earn money and thus elevate out of serfdom into a middle class, a new thing, while the high class remained church and nobility. And then you have the middle class, which is new, artisans and merchants and all that. And then you have still the serfdom, still the servant class. Okay, centuries earlier, Angles, Saxons, Vikings, they all settled in England. In 1066, Anglo-Saxon King Edward died without an heir. A ruthless Viking descended the throne, and this ruthless Viking descended the throne pretty efficiently, I'd have to say, because by the end of 1066, the same year of the death, bloody war occurred, and William the Conqueror, the Viking of heritage, won the crown of England. So William the Conqueror, King of England, he was, what he did? A couple of things. Very well liked, had support of the church, important. And he made all the vassals, which are the governors and mayors of regions in England, he made them all declare him as their direct superior. So that's important because they could have other liege lords, which is something that he wouldn't want if he wants to be total control, total power. William the Conqueror. Okay. And he also established a census, the first census in England in 1086. The common folk noted this census as the Doomsday Book because it helped make taxation a pretty difficult thing to elude. Henry II, different guy. Henry II, king in... this word is very hard to read, my handwriting. He instituted common law for all of England and jury systems. Jury word coming from jure, French word for sworn on oath. Jure, French word, derives from sworn on oath, so jurors are sworn on being honest. Henry II, the English king, had disputes with the church and the Pope, unlike William the Conqueror. He tried a church official in his court rather than in the church courts, so that's a no-no. Thomas Becket, Archbishop of Canterbury, he opposed William II. They used to be friends, but what happens, right? Simple story is as old as time. Thomas Becket opposes him, and Thomas Becket gets murdered by 4 knights. Thomas Becket is named a martyr, a saint in the Catholic faith. Henry II's son, John, King John, made powerful enemies in the Pope, Pope Innocent III, King Philip, King of France, and the English nobility. All 3 of these things have snowball effects that we'll talk about shortly. First, he lost a battle to France, lost a war to France, Philip II. He forfeited lands in Normandy and in Anjou. Then he got into troubles with Pope Innocent III, who appointed a new Archbishop of Canterbury that John said, no, I don't want any of that. My choice. And the Pope said, well, no, It's my choice. This is a dispute we'll read about shortly. So the Pope said no. He said, I'm going to excommunicate you, and I'm also going to do the interdict on England. Excommunication means you're out of the church. Interdict is like the whole country's out of the church. No more sacraments. And there's a problem, because if you believe in the faith of the time, you say, well, the Pope has to allow our nation to receive sacraments. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to enter the kingdom of heaven upon our death. So King John was kind of backed into a corner, because all of his people think, well, you're condemning us to eternal fire? Eternal fire? Me? For what you said to the Pope? No. So John said, okay, with the pressure of his society behind him, John said, okay, Pope Innocent III, forgive me. The Pope Innocent III said, all right, I'll forgive you, but you're going to have to forfeit England as a fief to the papacy and pay annual fees to Rome. And so John said, all right. Magna Carta. This is what happens when you get in trouble with the nobility in England. Magna Carta, the king affirmed a long list of feudal rights, so protection from free men from arbitrary arrest, imprisonment, and the statement that every free man was owed due process of law. Still a term we know today. Due process of law. Parliament, not the same exact thing, not the same exact timeline as the Magna Carta, but similar. Early 1200s as opposed to the Magna Carta, 1215. Big year, 1215, Magna Carta. Parliament develops in the early 1200s. Parler is the origin word, French word again, for talk. So Parliament, people that talk. Later on, they would receive power of the purse, which is the power to not give money to the Pope or the king. The king would need to get Parliament on his side so that he could receive money for whatever he wanted to do. Pretty important. French monarchs. So we just talked about English monarchs, French monarchs. This is a review from yesterday. In 987, Hugh Capet in Paris ruled for 300 years. His family did, the Capetians. They were on the good side of the church. Philip II, Philip Augustus, quadrupled the land holdings of France, and by his death in 1223 was the most powerful ruler in Europe. Louis IX, king and saint, ruled from 1226 to 1270, and he did a lot of good, very well liked, and became a saint and all that. He sent out people to take a look at all around at the different fiefs, different parts of the kingdom, so that he could have eyes and ears all around his massive plot of land that he was supervising as the king. Similar to what, what's his name did? Charlemagne with the Medici Dominici. Philip IV, Louis's grandson, wanted more favorable interactions with the Pope. So he had Pope, naturally, he had Pope Boniface VIII beaten to death, and he got his way. The papal court moved to Avion, which was on the border of France, which made it easier for them to interact. What a long review that was. I cannot make a habit of long reviews like that. That is excessive, but I hope it was informative. Holy Roman Empire. Holy Roman Empire and the Church. Setting the scene. The Church, you will recall, spread its influence across Europe during the early Middle Ages. By the High Middle Ages, both popes and monarchs were extending their authority. In the early 1200s, Pope Innocent III claimed broad powers. Just as the moon gets her light from the sun and is inferior to the sun in quality, quantity, position, and effect, so the royal powers get the splendor of the dignity of papal authority. This is a letter of Innocent III to the nobles of Tuscany. The papacy is the sun, the emperors and the secular leaders are the moon, The only sunlight they receive is because of the sun. So those moons are not as important as the sun. Sun being the papacy, moons being the not papacy, the secular rulers, like King John we were just talking about. With secular rulers advancing their own claims to power, explosive conflicts erupted between monarchs and church officials, and the longest and most destructive struggle pitted popes against Holy Roman emperors who ruled vast lands from Germany to Italy. Holy Roman Empire. Holy Roman Empire. In the early Middle Ages, as you have learned, the Emperor Charlemagne had brought much of present-day France and Germany under his rule. After Charlemagne's death, his empire dissolved into a number of separate states. In time, the Dukes of Saxony extended their power over the neighboring German lands. In 936, Duke Otto I of Saxony took the title King of Germany. Like Charlemagne, Otto I worked closely with the church. He appointed bishops to top government jobs. He also took an army into Italy to help the Pope defeat rebellious Roman nobles. In 962, a grateful Pope crowned Otto emperor. Later, Otto's successors took the title Holy Roman Emperor. Holy because they were crowned by the Pope. Roman because they saw themselves as heirs to the emperors of Rome 500 years previous. Okay. German emperors claimed authority over much of the Central Europe as well as parts of France and Italy. In fact, the real rulers of these lands were the emperor's vassals. Vassals being those smaller regional rulers as opposed to the king, who was the large ruler, overall ruler. Okay. In fact, the real rulers of the lands were the emperor's vassals, hundreds of nobles and church officials. For German emperors, the challenge was to control their vassals. In the end, you will see that the challenge was never met by the Holy Roman emperors, I guess. Another problem for the emperors was conflict with the popes over the appointment of church officials. Like other monarchs, the Holy Roman Emperor often decided who would become bishops and abbots within their realm. As the Cluny reforms strengthened the church, popes tried to end such outside interference from secular rulers, as we talked about earlier with Pope Innocent saying the sun is him and the moon are those rulers. Conflict between popes and emperors. Under the reforming Pope Gregory VII, the conflict between emperors and the church burst into flames. Gregory was one of the greatest medieval popes. He was also among the most controversial. Pope Gregory VII. Few Europeans of the time had a neutral view of Pope Gregory VII. Many admired and revered him. Among his enemies, however, he probably aroused more hatred and contempt than did any other pope of this time period. Gregory was determined to make the church independent of secular rulers. To do so, he banned the practice of lay investiture. Under this practice, the emperor or other lay person, lay meaning not a member of the clergy, invested or presented bishops with the ring and staff that symbolized their office. Only the Pope, said Gregory, had the right to appoint and install bishops in office. Emperor Henry IV. Pope Gregory's ban brought an angry response from the Holy Roman Emperor Henry IV. He argued that bishops held their lands as royal fiefs. Since he was their overlord, Henry felt entitled to give them the symbols of office. The feud heated up as the two men exchanged insulting notes. Meanwhile, rebellious German princes saw a chance to undermine Henry by supporting the Pope. struggle intensifies. In 1076, Gregory excommunicated Henry, freeing his subjects from their allegiance to the emperor. The Pope then headed north to crown a new emperor. Faced with revolts at home, Henry was forced to make peace with the Pope. In January of 1077, Henry crossed the icy Alps to Canossa. There, with bare feet and clad only in wretched woolen garment, he presented himself to the Pope as a repentant sinner. A nice loophole, you'll see. Gregory knew that Henry was just trying to save his throne. He was posturing. Still, as a priest, Gregory had no choice but to forgive a confessed sinner. He lifted the order of excommunication on Henry, and Henry quickly returned to Germany to subdue his rebellious nobles. In later years, he took revenge on Gregory when he led an army to Rome and forced the Pope into exile. Concordat of Worms. Concordat of Worms. The struggle over investiture dragged on almost 50 years. Finally, in 1122, both sides accepted a treaty known as the Concordat of Worms. In it, they agreed that the church had the sole power to elect and invest bishops with spiritual authority. The emperor, however, had the right to invest them with fiefs. So choose where they went, I suppose. Struggles for Italy. New heading. Although the investiture struggle was over, new battles were soon raging between popes and emperors. During the 1100s and 1200s, ambitious German emperors sought to master Italy. As they did so, they came into conflict with popes and with the wealthy towns in northern Italy. Frederick Redbeard Barbarossa. The Emperor Frederick I, called Barbarossa, or Redbeard, dreamed of building an empire from the Baltic to the Adriatic. For years, he fought to bring the wealthy cities of northern Italy under his control. With equal energy, they resisted. By joining forces under the Pope in the Lombard League, they managed to defeat Barbarossa's armies. Barbarossa did succeed, however, in arranging a marriage between his son Henry and Constance, heiress to Sicily and southern Italy. That move entangled German emperors even more deeply in Italian affairs. So Barbarossa Redbeard, he was he was a Holy Roman Emperor in Germany. Frederick II. The child of Henry and Constance, Frederick II, was raised in southern Italy. He was a noble, arrogant leader, willing to use any means to achieve his ends. As a Holy Roman Emperor, Frederick spent little time in Germany. Instead, he pursued his ambitions in Italy. There, he clashed repeatedly and unsuccessfully with several popes. Like his grandfather, Frederick also tried, but failed, to subdue the cities of northern Italy. Effects on Germany and Italy. While Frederick was embroiled in Italy, German nobles grew more independent. The Holy Roman Empire survived but it remained fragmented into many feudal states. The German people paid a high price for emperors' ambitions. Unlike France and England, Germany would not achieve unity for another 600 years. Southern Italy and Sicily also faced centuries of upheaval. There, popes turned to the French to overthrow Frederick's heirs. A local uprising against French rule in Sicily led to 200 years of chaos as French and Spanish rivals battled for power. The region that had once been a thriving center for culture was left to ruins. And finally, the last heading. Let's see if we can wrap this up in 22 minutes. The height of church power. Pope Innocent III, who took office in 1198, embodied the triumph of the church. As head of the church, he claimed supremacy over all other rulers. The Pope, he said, stands between God and man. Lower than God, but higher than man, who judges all and is judged by no one. Very convenient thing to say about yourself, that you can judge everyone and no one can judge you. Very good. Innocent clashed with all-powerful rulers of his day. More often than not, the Pope came out ahead. As you have read, when King John of England dared to appoint an Archbishop of Canterbury without the Pope's approval, Innocent excommunicated the king and placed his kingdom under interdict. We talked about it already. But that means that they can't receive the sacraments, which means for the believers, they were under the impression that since our nation is under interdict, if we remain here, we can't receive any more sacraments. Thusly, we are condemned to eternal fire. That's a problem, a political problem, if you ask me. Because they're not going to like you, your subjects. Because in their mind, they're condemned to eternal fire because of your decisions. Okay. Innocent ordered the same punishment for France when Philip II tried unlawfully to annul or invalidate his marriage. The Holy Roman Emperor Frederick II also felt the wrath of the powerful Pope. In 1209, Innocent, aided by Philip II, launched a brutal crusade, or holy war, against the Albigensians of southern France. Oh, so Philip and the Pope got along. They made up after the annulment controversy. Okay, so in 1209, Innocent, aided by Philip II, launched a brutal crusade or holy war against the Albigensians in southern France. The Albigensians also wanted to purify the church and return it to the simple ways of earlier Christianity. Tens of thousands of people were slaughtered in the Albigensian crusade. And as I say, anything that lasts 2,000 years like Christianity has. There's a lot of games of telephone where the first person says, "Oh, a simple truth. This makes sense." The 50th person says, "This simple truth is no longer simple because I've heard 50 different iterations." And by the 200th iteration, we're not hearing the thing that happened in the first place. The game of telephone. Have you ever played it? After Innocent's death, popes continued to press their claim to supremacy. During this period, though, the French and English monarchs were growing stronger. In 1296, Pope Philip IV of France successfully challenged Pope Boniface III on issues of taxation and clergy. After Philip engineered the election of a French pope, the papacy entered a period of decline. My understanding of that engineering that he did is beating Pope Boniface VIII to death. Engineering the election of a pope. I believe that's what happened. Maybe it's wrong. But as always, good morning, good evening, good afternoon. And remember, context is everything. That's it. What a beautiful day.